What if one of the greatest sources of life comes from something very simple, looking outside of ourselves? In today's episode, we're talking about humility, selflessness, and quiet power of reaching toward another's personal pain.
Yeah, we also want to talk about why it can sometimes feel hard to reach out, how insecurity, fear of rejection, worrying about saying the wrong thing can hold us back from doing this. We'll also talk about what happens when we can move past those fears and choose connection instead.
Research shows that helping others can actually increase our happiness, strengthen our resilience, and give our lives a deeper sense of meaning. Sometimes the very thing that heals our own hearts is simply showing up for someone else.
Do you sometimes feel lost in your relationships, your identity, or even your spirituality? Welcome to Gilmore&green, where healing and hope meet.
We are marriage and family therapists and relationship experts who care deeply about helping you grow, strengthen your relationships, and deepen your sense of meaning and spirituality.
We long to share from our clinical experience, years of training and solid research, including ideas about how to strengthen the things that matter the most to all of us in life.
We're so glad you're here. Our hope is to share simple, meaningful ideas that support you in your healing and in your growth. Welcome to Gilmore&green, where healing and hope meet.
Welcome to our podcast. I'm Cheryl&green, a marriage and family therapist.
And I'm Dr. Debbie Gilmore, also a licensed marriage and family therapist. And today we want to talk about something that quietly can transform the way we live, the way we heal, the way we connect with others. The idea is simple but powerful. It's not about us. Now, that phrase can sound a little harsh at first. After all, we live in a world that often encourages us to focus inward. Our goals, our success, our happiness, our struggles, and of course, caring for ourselves does matter. But something beautiful happens when we step outside of ourselves and begin to see the world through someone else's eyes.
Yeah, Debbie, I think you're talking about the kind of joy that comes when we lift our gaze, when we notice someone else's burden and start reaching towards it. It's kind of one of those paradoxes in life, right? The more we obsess about our own pain, the heavier it can often feel. But when we turn outward, when we start to care about someone else's experience, we can find our own hearts start to soften. You know, humility, that's such a wonderful value and attribute that's so important. But one of the things it does is it helps us remember that we're not the center of the story, right? We're part of a much bigger human experience. And in that shared experience we have with humanity, we all know that everyone is carrying something, right? Some people are carrying grief, some are carrying loneliness, some carry quiet shame or exhaustion that no one else may see. And when we can begin to, as you said, turn our gaze outward and recognize that, there's a compassion that starts to grow within us naturally.
It really is a natural process, but we don't understand it until we exercise that, when we do it. But what gets in the way of reaching outside of ourselves? Well, a lot of things actually. As we talk about the idea that life isn't just about us, it raises a really important question. If reaching out to others brings so much meaning and connection, why don't we do it more often? Most of the time, it's not because we don't care. It's because something inside of us gets in the way. The pressure to say the right thing might be one really important one. Often that something is insecurity. Many of us quietly wonder, what if I say the wrong thing? What if they think I'm awkward? What if they don't want my help or don't want to talk to me?
Instead of reaching out, right, we hold back. We stay silent instead of saying actually what's in our heart, and we walk past the moment, right? There's moments that we grab that are precious, and we often walk past those moments. Another thing that stops us is the pressure to say the perfect thing, right? When someone's hurting, we often feel like we need the right words, something that sounds really wise or comforting or profound even. But the reality is that most people, they're not even looking for that. They don't need the perfect words. What they actually need is our presence. Someone who's just willing to sit down beside them and listen and care. And that's so much more simple than worrying about, oh goodness, can I say this perfectly will what I say sound wise and profound. You just need our presence. And so sometimes the most healing thing that we can say to someone is really simple. Just, I'm so glad you told me this. Or, wow, that sounds really hard. I love this one. I'm here for you. Just to say that. It doesn't have to be polished or perfect. It just has to be sincere. There's so much that happens in people's hearts when they feel that from us. Another barrier to this reaching out, where it's not just about us, is the fear of rejection. Because this is risky to do, right? Reaching towards someone, especially when they're hurting, does require some vulnerability on our parts. It does mean risking that the other person might not respond in the way that we hoped. That can be frightening, scary. And so we might make an attempt to connect or be helpful. And the result is that they may not open up, or the response may not be positive. They might even brush us off or pull away. That's another reason, just this fear of rejection that sometimes blocks us from reaching out in the ways and capturing that moment that we've just talked about.
Yeah, and rejection is painful. No one likes that. This sense of I tried and then it was completely pushed away. And because humans are wired to avoid emotional pain, sometimes we protect ourselves by simply not trying at all. It's paralysis. But the truth is, most people aren't rejecting us. They're often just unsure themselves. They're every bit as awkward feeling as we are. Many people are quietly wondering the same thing. Does anyone notice my pain? Does anyone care that I'm hurting? Or when we say something like, I'm here for you, how do you respond to that? We're not sure. Or we are uncomfortable. And so we want to just push that away as well. We might be distracted by our own existing pain. Sometimes the thing that keeps us turned inward is simply that our own pain feels so loud, it's blinding. When we are overwhelmed, when we're anxious or discouraged, our world can shrink down to the size of our own struggles. That's all we see. It's a very human experience. It's normal. But interestingly, one of the ways our hearts begin to expand again is through connection. It's medicine for our soul. When we reach towards someone else, it reminds us that we're a part of something larger than our own worries. It's a calming, peaceful salve on our own pain. So if insecurity, if fear or self doubt ever hold you back from reaching towards someone, you're not alone. Those feelings are part of being human. But often the small, quiet decision to reach anyway, to offer kindness despite the uncertainty, becomes one of the most meaningful and courageous choices that we can make.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate again that most of the time people don't remember what we said. What they remember is that we showed up. Isn't it Maya Angelou who says people won't remember? What is it she says? It's so good. How you made me feel, right?
Right. It's the experience of the moment. They can't recreate the words, but they knew that it was safe and comforting.
Yeah. And that's exactly what our human hearts need the most, is someone that shows up. I'm amazed how many times I've asked someone, "Are you okay?" And they respond with, "Wow, how did you know? I'm not okay." Just that one question said with sincerity, eye contact, no distractions, and his full presence can be so healing. The sense that they're not alone and someone acknowledges that they are struggling and facing a challenge. I actually had that happen to me yesterday. Somebody said that to me. They could tell I was tired and said to me, "Are you okay?" It made my eyes water up, just to have somebody do that for me. And so it's just such a powerful thing. So humility, as we talked about it a minute ago, isn't thinking less about ourselves. That's not at all what humility is. It's about thinking of ourselves less often. It's that ability to pause long enough to ask, what might this person be going through right now? Sometimes the person in front of us, Debbie, may seem different. They may seem impatient or withdrawn. That's what we see, right? But this humility, where we're able to look a little more deeper into their hearts and their world and what might be happening, instead of reacting with the frustration that often can come when someone's like that with us, we can ask ourselves, wow, what's the pain underneath all of this? Are they afraid? Is there fear right now for them? Is there a story I don't know? I love that practice, really. It's a practice, right? Of looking behind those visible emotions in people and asking ourselves, what's really going on for them, what might be happening in their heart and their world that I could see more clearly.
I've been doing this in grocery stores. We come across people that are so agitated and angry with the world. And because of our work, Sherilyn, we sit with people who are in pain and often aggressive. And we are trained to say to ourselves, I know that there's pain beneath that. There's something that's happening so deep inside of them. The only way they can cope right now is just to be aggressive and angry and openly frustrated. So we can become more compassionate humans if we see beyond the pain that's expressing on the outside. So when we ask those questions, something shifts inside of us. Judgment begins to soften into curiosity. Curiosity begins to soften into compassion. Compassion has such an incredible effect on us, not only on others, but on us. We are therapists, so it's in our blood to ask questions and show compassion. However, you, our listeners, don't have to be a therapist to lean into someone's life to offer empathy and support. There is what I would call a deep joy that comes from reaching toward another person's pain. Think about the times in your life when someone really showed up for you. You talked about that experience yesterday, Sherilyn, where someone said, how are you really? And maybe they listened when you were hurting. Maybe they sat with you in your grief. Maybe they offered kindness when you least expected it, or even didn't feel like you merited that kindness. Those moments, they stay with us because they remind us that we are not alone in this harsh world. When we extend that same kind of care to someone else, something meaningful happens inside our own hearts. We feel purpose. We feel healed to some level. We feel connection. We feel the quiet joy that comes from loving another human being.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about anecdotal things, right? It's so important to note that the research, much modern research actually confirms something that, we've all sensed for centuries in our world, that when we do reach outside of ourselves to help others, there are powerful things that happen inside of us, just as you talked about, Debbie. So the research across psychology, neuroscience, and the health sciences certainly consistently show that turning outward, that helping, serving, and caring for others has such powerful benefits for both. I love that, for both the giver and the receiver. Interestingly enough, many of the findings echo, what faith traditions and human wisdom has suggested for centuries, and that is that we truly do flourish when we move beyond ourselves. In Christianity, it's taught that when you lose your life, you find it, right? Maybe this is a good example of exactly what the research is verifying. So psychologists that study kindness and service have found that helping others, it increases happiness, it reduces depression, it will strengthen our sense of meaning in life. Oh, that's so important. We all need meaning. And rescuers will call this, right, the helper's high. There's many vocations where this is talked about, the helper vocations, and that there is a high that comes when we are engaged in this. So when we do something kind for someone else, our brains actually release chemicals of dopamine and oxytocin that create feelings of warmth and connection and well-being. There truly is a beautiful flood of chemicals that come into our brain when we are reaching for other people.
Isn't that interesting? In the midst of our pain, when they do fMRI scans, the pleasure center of the brain lights up when we are in the act of serving someone else, even when we are in, and our brains, when we're in emotional pain, it registers as physical pain. But think about it. So if we then reach outside of ourselves, it's going to calm that pain within us and light up the pleasure center of our brain. That's amazing science that coincides with, what we're taught in Christianity, to reach outside of ourselves and find ourselves, which means, to me, healing. So in other words, caring for others literally changes our brain chemistry in a positive way. Research also, I love this research that we can share, Sherilyn, because it just reinforces that we're not just talking about things we believe are true, These are from thousands of studies. Research shows that people who regularly volunteer or serve others often experience lower stress, better emotional resilience. Don't we all want that? And even improved physical health because it counters the cortisol that courses through our organs, damaging them. Some long-term studies actually suggest that we might live longer when we are frequently in the act of serving others. That's awesome. One of the most important findings that serving others strengthens our sense of purpose, meaning, purpose, and connection. When we focus only on ourselves, life can begin to feel small, even heavy. Those burdens that we want to release actually increase when we don't reach outside of ourselves and connect. When we step into someone else's world and help carry their burden, our own hearts expand. So, serving others increases happiness and life satisfaction. More research, it shows that pro social, meaning outside of ourselves, acts of helping, generosity, and kindness is strongly associated with greater happiness and life satisfaction. There's some research that's been done on people. They found that regularly performing acts of kindness report higher levels of well-being. These are qualitative research studies. In one well-known study, participants who performed 5 acts of kindness in a week, just think about it, just interspersed throughout those 7 days, they experienced significantly greater happiness than those who didn't. It was measurably significant in research terms. So research, we talked about this. You mentioned this, helper's high. So those chemicals that are released are a natural drug, I would say. Isn't that exciting?
It really is. And it doesn't increase just happiness. What's important as well is it reduces now depression and anxiety. And so these same studies show, of course, that focusing outward can reduce rumination. Boy, that's something that comes up a lot in our work. You know, people will say to me, I can't stop ruminating. I don't know how to get this out of my head. And this repetitive negative thinking that kind of fuels their anxiety and depression. And so it's exciting to know that something this simple, you know, can help in just some of that rumination that's so problematic for people. Research, again, published in the Journal of Happiness, found that people who engage in helping behaviors experience, again, lower levels of depression, an increased sense of purpose, and I love this, improved emotional resilience. So when we become absorbed in someone else's need, it can actually interrupt those mental loops of self-criticism or worry that people talk about. They just get stuck over and over again in their heads, and it's so actually debilitating. I love how simple this suggestion is to combat some of that people suffer with.
Yeah, it's like an anti-anxiety medication. So now I think you mentioned earlier, Sherilyn, about how service helps improve our physical health. So I want to just go into that a little more and give you some details, some specifics about what this means. Helping others isn't just psychologically beneficial, it helps our body. So there's been some research by Dr. Stephen Post that found that individuals who volunteer show lower blood pressure. It directly impacts lower blood pressure, reduced stress hormones like cortisol, improved immune functioning. So our immunity increases, and that is really helpful for people with autoimmune disorders, and increased longevity. So in some long-term studies, people who consistently serve others live longer, significantly longer, by 5 to 10 years, and live healthier lives than those who don't engage in helping behaviors. And this one, I think, is probably my favorite. Compassion strengthens our social connections. If we want to be more social and better at connecting with others, humans are biologically wired for connection. So acts of service activate neural systems in our brain associated with bonding and attachment. So if we are a little insecure, maybe an introvert, and would like to improve on our initiating connection, that compassion strengthens our ability to do that more. Can you talk about that Stanford study that we mentioned earlier?
I can. So it again shows that compassionate acts increase feelings of belonging, right? This is so important in our attachment science and trust between people. Another really important part of attachment, this trust and belonging. And as you talked about, Debbie, this matters so much because of the social connection that we know is one of the strongest predictors of overall well-being, right? We're all looking for well-being in life, and this in and of itself is such a predictor of that important social connection. We know, you and I, that loneliness carries the same health risks as smoking or obesity. It takes such a hit on us, this loneliness. And so serving others strengthen the very bonds that protect not just our emotional health, but our physical health as well. We want to talk too about how this builds meaning and purpose in our lives. Psychologist Martin Seligman has emphasized that a meaningful life comes from serving something beyond oneself, right? That's some of his most powerful research that we all, on some level, know and understand, but it's good to know it's backed up by that. And that the research on purpose in life shows that individuals who feel like they contribute to others' experience, again, they feel greater life satisfaction. They, again, have stronger resilience during adversity. They have higher motivation and fulfillment. And so, if we could put that in maybe concise words, meaning often grows when we stop asking ourselves, what do I want from life? It's a question we all ask, and maybe ask it differently and say, how can I contribute? What can I do?
So before you go on, I just wanted to add when I counsel men who are anticipating retirement, and mostly men, I mean, women also are in the workforce and are considering retirement, but it seems that men really struggle with what am I going to do? How am I going to navigate the next years of my life? Anticipating retirement is exciting for them. Then they actually realize, I am retired. What am I going to do? And research tells us that these men die within 5 to 7 years. But there is a counter to that, and that is reaching outside. They will have greater satisfaction when they reinvent themselves. Don't just go home and sit and put your feet up. When you go out and reinvent yourself, take your skills and apply them in service, you will have greater life satisfaction. You will have stronger resilience and greater physical health. You will live longer, and that meaning and purpose will be richer than you ever imagined. So I just wanted to insert that, Sherilyn.
Glad you did, because that is a really tricky season of life, right? Retirement, especially for men. And what you've just described is I think the magic sauce actually of it, if they can find purpose and meaning somewhere by contributing. I love that you said with their skills, there's so many places then that they can take those lifelong skills that they've developed and really create blessings. So yeah, I'm really glad that you've talked about that. So I guess, Debbie, then what does this mean in our everyday life, right? As we've talked about this, the research and all of the things, it's simple but powerful stuff. But basically, when we can look outside ourselves to others or notice someone that's struggling, when we can offer kindness, when we can listen to another person's story, when we can lift another person's burden, we're not only helping them, right, but we are strengthening our own emotional and physical well-being. Service always expands our perspective, right? We learn that we're not the only ones suffering in life, that other people are carrying heavy burdens as well, that lessens our own pain.
I'm just loving what you're saying because this is so true. I've seen it happen in my own life. I've watched it happen in some of my friends that are now retiring, and that emotional and physical well being combined. That's why they call it the golden years, but it's not golden if you're not really reaching outside yourself. That doesn't just apply to retired people. It applies to everyone. We should be teaching our children these principles and our grandchildren these principles. We should be trying in small ways, even when we have small children and we're young mothers, to in some way reach out to another young mother and say, I get it. I know this is hard. So sorry. Yes, I'm just excited about what you're sharing.
Yeah, and just modeling that for our kids, right? They watch us do that, and that would be a blessing for the rest of their lives. These benefits we're talking about, it's a gift we would give them. Yeah, I want to mention one other thing, is as we do this, our own hearts start to soften. We do. We just see more clearly others. We have this sense and this reminder that we belong to one another. I just love that. And so, in a world where, oh my goodness, so many people, if not all of us, are carrying heavy burdens, even just small acts of compassion, there's a rippling effect for this that goes so much further than we even comprehend or realize. Often we never know the full impact of some kind of quiet thought or word or act to someone. We may never know the full extent of what that does. And so, again, we'll just say the science is so clear that when we lift others, we are lifted too. And just the simple act of noticing someone, listening to them, offering kindness can change both lives in that moment. Again, these are the precious moments of life. I think the moments that matter most. And that blessing comes to not just us, but to them as well.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm worried that we glossed over something earlier that I want to just spend a couple of minutes on, and that's the term humility that you introduced, Sherilyn. This is where humility becomes deeply spiritual. Most faith traditions teach that our lives are meant to be about something bigger than ourselves. I see that in all the major five religions of the world. There is this sense of spirituality, faith, and connecting with others and lifting others' burdens. When we stop asking, what do I deserve, which is prevalent, and start asking, who needs me today? And to notice, I want to notice someone that might need my influence and help today. When we can do that, we begin to live differently ourselves. We start noticing others. The coworker who seems overwhelmed happened to you yesterday, Sherilyn. The friend who has grown quiet suddenly. The neighbor who might be carrying a burden alone. Often the most meaningful acts of service are quite small. A thoughtful message, a sincere conversation, a moment of patience instead of irritation. These are spiritual to me. I had a neighbor years ago who knew that I was struggling with, I can't even remember what the challenge was. In the mail, she lived next door. She mailed a card to me that had daisies on the front. And she said, even though the world looks like daisies around you, I know that you are facing a challenge. I love you. I'm here for you. That I will never forget, that act of kindness, that humble reach from her. Now, these simple acts can feel ordinary to us, but they can mean everything to someone else. So here's another surprising truth. Looking outward doesn't diminish us. And this is probably the most important thing I could say. Reaching outside of us doesn't diminish us, it actually expands us. When we serve, comfort, and care for others, our world becomes bigger than our own worries. Our perspective changes, our hearts become more open, and often the healing we're hoping to receive begins to grow naturally inside of us. And when we reach outside of ourselves and do those things, it gives others permission to do the same.
I love hear you remind us that it doesn't diminish us. It really does expand us in so many ways. And so we're hoping today to leave you with just a simple invitation and for many a reminder. There's so many people doing this that are so good at this, but maybe a reminder, an invitation for all of us that today to try and shift our focus just slightly more outward, right? To be more conscious of noticing someone who might be struggling, to listen just a little more closely, to offer kindness where it might not be expected, because life becomes so much richer and deeper and more meaningful when we remember it's not all about us. And in that humility, Debbie, that you've talked about, we do discover that one of the greatest joys available to the human heart is this joy that comes when we can ease the burden of someone else. There really is no other joy like that, I think. What we've been talking about is some of the most meaningful, precious parts of our human experience. I'm to the point with you, Debbie, that we get to talk about the therefore what. And I don't know why I'm thinking about this. I walk in the mornings. I've walked in the mornings for 25 years, and often it's in the darkness. And I find myself looking down a lot. And I have a friend who is constantly telling us to look up and find the shooting stars. I would have gone for 25 years without noticing the stars and the shooting stars, without her guidance to look up. And as we're talking about this and looking up and outward, I'm just reminding myself of what I miss when I don't do that. I miss the shooting stars, the beautiful light in life when I don't look up and look too inward. And so my therefore what is to remember even more clearly the great joy that comes when I look outward instead of inward. And I'm thinking about some of the specific ways I can better do that even today.
Oh, that's beautiful. And when we look up, we can then see others' pain instead of just our own. I love that. My therefore what is something that I've been trying to do lately just naturally. And you mentioned that there are so many listeners out there that are so good at what we're talking about. I've started to notice and take note of those who are such beautiful, what I call ministers. They're ministering to others in such beautiful ways. It's a gift. I consider it a gift in others. So I've been taking note. I've been noticing specific things that they do and thinking to myself, I want to do that. I wouldn't, maybe naturally, that wouldn't occur to me. I'm not a I don't have a gift of being able to come up with creative gifts for others. And there's some people that are just amazing at that. This one thing, if I can notice what someone does and I think, wow, that made a difference, I can add that to my toolbox. And that's what I've been doing, trying to be more aware of those who have the gift of being able to be humble and a minister to others and just add that. Thank you so much for listening today. We hope that you will continue to follow us and join us in these podcasts and send us ideas of topics that are helpful to you.
Thanks, everyone. We just love being with you. Have a beautiful day.